Blessings, fellow weird and wild ones. My name's Goddess, aka G, aka your friendly neighborhood witch. They, them, their pronouns, please and thank you, point blank, period. Thank you for joining me in the practice of finding our way back to wholeness. This is our temple, our playground, our life, and our truths. During our audio session together, I will be talking with my village on how we are healing, changing paradigms, and decolonizing and degendering the mind. You are not alone. You are enough. Let's plant these divine seeds together. This work is for the collective from me, Brandon, Brenda, Kay, and Vesta. And there's a lot of magic that goes on behind the scenes. Find ways to support and reciprocate all the co-creators on the show at the links below. Grab your pens and paper, grab your woes, and let go. You can rest. Nalo A. Zidan is a queer Black writer, organizer, and Trans-Masculinist whose work pushes at the normative boundaries of gender and sexuality in Black masculine experiences. The independent Black masculinity scholar is the founder and creative director of Blackgirlmasculine, a nonprofit organization and media space for queer, Black, masculine identified women, trans, and non-binary people. Founded in 2016, the organization serves a global audience with a mission to expand and archive non-normative masculine experiences. Born in Maryland and raised between New York and DC, Nalo is currently completing a degree in women, gender, and sexuality studies at Louisiana State University and is a 2019 TEDx LSU speaker. Nalo has dedicated her life to starting conversations that shift how we see the world and everyone in it, while creating visibility and healing for queer Black experiences along the way. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. How do you feel when people read your bio?
I feel like it's a mouthful, and I feel like I want to rewrite it every time. And every time I do rewrite it, it still feels like that. I'm like, it's like that thing where you're balancing like scholarly academic things where you're in competition with white spaces, and then you also are like, actually, I'm just like, I love Black people, I love gender creative people, and we all trying to make it. So I created a space where we can come together to map out what that looks like for our freedom.
Yeah,
like that's what I wish the bio could be like. That's the bio.
I feel you. I feel you. I mean, you've done a lot, but yeah, like the heart of it and what your intention is so simple because it doesn't need to be really like
the academy
wordy.
Does that to you. I'm telling you, they especially when you're like trying to get grants and you're up for awards, all these things. So I probably sent you like the quick short version of that. It's even worse when it's longer. So like I'm gonna calm it down a little bit next time I give my bio to somebody. But thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth telling. But you are more than what is on there. So for sure, I feel what you're saying.
Appreciate that, Goddess.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for doing this. This conversation isn't one that I get to have often with other masculine center folks. So it's like Black, like masculine center folks. So this is like so needed. So you were actually the first recording of the season. So excuse me if I'm rusty, but we're going to go through our pronouns real quick.
So good.
And then say the race we embody, and then we'll do a little check-in.
No doubt.
All right. So my name's Goddess, and I use they, them, their pronouns, and I am Black-bodied.
My name is Nalo Zidan. I use all pronouns, and I am Black as they come.
All right. Now we know. It's clear. So the check-in for the day is, in this moment, where in your body do you feel is expressing your masculinity?
In this moment, I feel like my masculinity or my masculine energy per se is manifesting a lot in my torso and shoulders. Like I've been feeling like more upright and stronger in my back, even with the weight of understanding and being with the weight of the ache of my ancestors and that have been with me constantly, and recognizing some of that pain as we continue to navigate the stories of our lives, being lost, all those things. So like during this moment in this pandemic time, I've noticed that even in the ways that I've felt their pain, I've also felt them keep my head high and my back straight and my shoulders back and letting me know that I'm loved.
Yeah. It sounds like from what you're saying, it's that strength that we find in masculinity, but also strength that we find in feminine energy as well.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
and
it.
that they're definitely not separate for sure.
No.
That's kind of my work. That's kind of my work. Yeah.
So I feel it in my hips. It's interesting you say that you feel very strong in your back, because I threw out my back the other day. But I feel a lot of protection in my hips and like my shoulders. And that same feeling of like the ancestors are at my back. But what am I doing to honor their story and honor my own story and allow those spaces to kind of soften? And when I wrote the question for our check-in, I actually thought of something, and I was like, well, I wonder if we could do this too, of like re-looking at those same spots and where we notice the masculinity, because my work is also in like decolonizing what it means to be masculine. Like, how do I define that feeling also in a feminine way or a non-gendered way? So like, can we go back to it and I think you did that already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the ways that like the body is designed that way too. Like you said, that you threw out your back, which is awful. And also that your hips are like, I still got you, you know? It's like, there's such a sweetness in the ways that like our bodies are still always trying to find the light, like sunflowers in some way.
Yes. Absolutely. Feel that. So
are you asking me now?
Yeah, like if you could re-describe that, like that area in your back and those same attributes, but from a way that isn't gendered, like outside of masculinity.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking. I think with regards to where I hold certain energies, I think the human construct of aesthetic and strength and kind of colonization in general has attached gender to a lot of these things. But I learned from the liminal space where I was able to be with ancestors and how they communicate with me through tarot and how they show up for me on a daily basis, that like gender is the limitation with which we are almost unable to see gender energies or just energies in general without attaching them to gender. And so as I hold them in my body, I'm the proof, you're the proof. The world takes us up in a particular way. We're a very visually satisfying species. Like everything is based on desirability and all these things. And so as I navigate what that means in my own body, I've kind of like allowed these energies to ferment in me to mean whatever the culture of my own life is producing in them. So like I'm supposed to be a particular way based on how the construct of gender and aesthetic has combined to say I'm supposed to be in dresses, or I'm supposed to be softer, or I'm supposed to be whatever. And I'm like, I am soft. I'm just also masculine. And the balance of the energies in me, just like the stars will prove in astrology, just like our personalities will prove, there are things that are stronger in some ways than others. But it's not limited to the bodies that it manifests in. It's not limited to the genders that I have, and that all my masculinities are valid in my experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. I see. I love the way in which you combine the body with like nature, and there's so much language that we use that we kind of assume to be gendered, and it doesn't have to be, and it's that feels like the real limitation. And so when I think about the strength that my hips are holding, like, you know, like they're holding down the foundation while other parts of me heal, that while that reminds me of like a father, or it also reminds me of a mother, and it reminds me of elders, and it reminds me of the ways in which I myself am learning how to have grace and understanding for the ways in which my body compensates, and noticing all of that. So I definitely agree with you. And it's a process, I think, as we go through the other questions and have this chat, we learn the way, like, defining masculinity outside of what we deem it to be is such a process. And it's going to take our whole life. But in that process, it's so beautiful.
Yes.
Because there's no map. So you can explore all the terrain.
And I think that's the sweetness, right? Like there's this space of I know what I was taught that this meant, but also I'm allowed to say, nah, that doesn't feel like truth to me. You know, I'm allowed to sift through how the world has tried to impress a social understanding of something, and it also isn't true from my experience. I'm allowed to push back against it. I'm allowed to be free in how it lands with me and how it is true to me in my own experience, and how to share that space with other people. And I think that's also why when gender is in the conversation, we do have an issue with how feminine energies manifest in trans women, or how masculine energies, you know, manifest in masculine women, non-binary people, trans men, all those things. And I feel really deeply connected to this idea that energy isn't gendered; it's how we're socialized. And the first step for me is always to separate it from manhood itself and allow manhood to take on the culture of itself without allowing masculinity to then be toxic overall or overarchingly. I'm like, because I'm masculine, you feel me? And I don't get the same power, and I don't get the same access to those things. So let's talk about how to complicate that. You know, it's a really beautiful blooming, and I'm always thankful to share space and to learn so that I can continue blooming in my own manifestation of it too.
Yes, always a process. Well, going back to what you were saying about like pushing out back against that, as a lighter skinned Black socialized to be female bodied individual, all those words, what expectations around boundaries and expressions of emotions were placed upon you at a younger age? And what were some of the key moments in which you defied them and pushed back at them?
That's a great question. I am actually a Pentecostal baby, so it was even more complicated than that. I was raised in Holy Ghost fire, shouting, organ playing church, Black church. And so, you know, I wasn't allowed to be with my masculinity. If anything, my masculinity was the rebellion that continued to keep me curious about who I was, because it didn't fit with what they were telling me. You know, like I'm a young child and I'm like, why when they joking around, that little boy is my little boyfriend, I feel no attraction to this, you know, like, or not even just that, like, why when I'm being put in these skirts or dresses, I don't feel as pretty, as I don't feel like I want to hear that you're pretty. You know what I'm saying? Like, some of those ways that we have kind of wrapped up the container of how to be with a girl or how to be with a female bodied person. It's like you kind of get lost in the structure of what you're supposed to be versus who you are. And the thing, like for me, masculinity was that space where I had to soften into myself to allow myself to have the balance of all the energies that make me up, rather than trying to take it upon myself to be a rigid one version or the other of myself. I always wanted to just be me. And I was like, what does that look like? I remember asking myself, before I got to that place, I fell on the altar at 12 years old. And I was like, listen, Jesus, you feel me? Like crying, full tears, red face, snot. And I was like, listen, Jesus, if I got a demon in my body that's causing me to like women and to be at that time tomboyish was the language that I used for myself because that's what everyone saw in me as well. I'm like, if this ain't supposed to be here, I'm asking you to take it out. I'm trusting you. I'm surrendering. I left there and remembered seeing the most beautiful child that was in church that Sunday that I'd ever seen. And I was still drawn to her in some desirability way. And she was also, I think she was 13. She was 12 or 13. And after that moment, I began to ask a lot of questions about whether or not my emotion, the ways that I processed emotion, the ways that I understood my being, my body, all that, if it was real. It's like I began to imagine who I actually was rather than living it because I wasn't allowed to. And so I think pushing back against the emotions that were in conversation with that pretending or the manipulation of myself to be able to be socially accepted by my church or whatever, I'm like, suppression also wouldn't have saved me from hell because I still felt the things I felt and knew myself to be the person I was. So after I broke out of that and kind of, started the repair of everything that I felt I'd lost from indoctrination, it allowed me to bloom into asking the questions necessary to separate myself from the culture of masculinity, to build or create with community what accountable masculinities can look like, what it means to actually submit to who we are without having this category that belonged to men. And I was then an imposter, impersonator in there. So it's definitely been a journey that I've had to kind of be with the nuances of my particular masculinity. So I wasn't following men and trying to learn from, how they speak to women or how they dress or how they do whatever. It's like, I can do it my way. I have this organic masculine energy in me just as much as we assume is in our sons when they're born. And so it's been a time navigating all that.
Yes, I'm like picturing a young Nalo like at the church, like just like tears running down your face, and like that moment of, and especially at a young age, because that moment of completely like letting go of the tethers that we think define us and just laying it all out and being like, where is me in this? What is my truth? And then to start the process of like picking up the pieces that you feel really do resonate with you.
That's right. And also asking God, I'm like, you, if you omnipotent, and like if you're everywhere, all powerful, all knowing, I need you to like, how did you, like, where's your accountability, God? Like, you know me. You know me. Even like, I don't have to I didn't have to come out outwardly say, I'm gay, I'm queer, I'm whatever. I didn't even know the language for it because I was like a mischievous child who was also, they had attempted to shelter me in a lot of ways. And so when I think about it, I'm like, I had no connection to who I actually was because I was still in this space of acting toward what would satisfy the people that I cared about. And that's what made it so hard. It's like, I wanted to know from God, I'm like, if being omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent means anything to you, then you knew who I'd become or what I was struggling with as a child. Is it that humans got it wrong, or did God let me down? And that was a huge struggle for me, for sure.
What was the struggle in for you with that piece? Because I think there's a lot there.
You said what happened for me? It kind of glitched a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's glitched on my end too. I'm hoping we'll be okay. What was the struggle for you with that piece of like, did God let me down, or was it like, something within me? Yeah.
I think it was that day, when I when I lay face down on the altar and after service and ask God, like, if it's a demon, and if these stories are true, even though I've been praying, even if my family didn't go to church, I got my little preteen self on the bus and rode across town, 4 buses to get from one side of DC to the other, just to get there, and to be in right relationship with God, and to be with the text, and to show God that I was a loyal servant, all these things. And then for that moment to come up for me and for it not to be changed, I was struggling with whether, like, the moment after that prayer or laying on the altar worshiping, if that was the moment where God was affirming that it was okay because I felt that connection to the girl right after, or if I was just a sinner. And the thing that kind of cleared that up for me was over time when I realized that my connection to spirituality, to God, and to the very liminal space of between this body and eternal life or other universes, was the fact that if I was that low on the scale of where God would be pleased, then I wouldn't be as blessed as I am. You know what I'm saying? Or I wouldn't have access to the joy that I feel. Like, I'm like, the way that I understood the Bible was to limit the blessings of those who came against God, per se. And that was just something I really struggled with. And then I'm like, I've been calling God he pronouns all the time. He ain't tell me that. You feel me? Like he or any of the ways that it was God was constructed for me, I had questions about. And I'm like, who said, if I'm made in the image of God, then God is queer. And God is all identities. And God is not gendered by he and all these other things. I'm like, let's talk about what the image of God is based on the vastness of what we know humans to be. I'm like, humans are the ones limiting what God power or spirit power looks like. So it was a journey, okay?
Yes. Yes, coming back to that divineness.
I'm saying.
Like, so we're both reading Love and Rage by Lamar Owens. And in it, he talks about how, like, Black folks have been, like, disconnected from our bodies because of racial trauma. And racial trauma is gender trauma, is all the things. So, but it makes us feel unsafe to occupy ourselves, and also to trust ourselves and trust what we are feeling, and that it is not a sin and that we are not bad people. So I'm curious, like, after that happened, after that moment in church, and then seeing that beautiful young woman, like, who in your life continuously reflected back to you that was okay and safe to occupy yourself, and, like, or did you have to continuously just fill up your own cup? That's hard to do.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I did have to make the decision. It was like, church also offers this very powerful component that keeps us coming back. It's the fellowship, it's the food, it's the culture, it's the family, and all that wrapped up into, the gift of what the Black church, I'll say specifically, was for me. I had to be willing to give all that shit up. Excuse my language. I'm like, I had to be willing. I had to be willing to give that up and that was the hardest part. It's like, are you going to choose you or the experience of this performance? Do they really love you, or do they love the idea of you being obedient to God in the ways they know is true? And that's what messed me up. I was like, actually, I only get this one life on this earth. I'm not harming nobody because I'm trying to figure out who I love and who I am and how to love me, how to be in right relationship with myself. If that means compromising my relationship with you, guess what, player? I'm out of here. And that was important for me to recognize that I needed to be able to say that I love myself enough to continue fighting for my relationship with myself. fighting to be in right relationship with myself. Like, what did that mean to me? And that's kind of where I pivoted and wanted to fight for myself outside of indoctrination, and how that was the limitation that I couldn't really fight through. Is your I want to ask you, I don't know if this can be edited out the recording, but is your screen still freezing and stuff too?
Yeah, it is. I was actually going to see if we could take off our video and see if that'll help with the. So I'm
also about to tell everybody in my house to get off the Wi-Fi too. So, because that's what that's what be happening.
I mean, I'll be honest, my internet connection, they be playing me sometimes. Like, why am I paying for this? So it could be me on my end too. Who knows?
Let's see. It's all good. We're gonna do what we gotta do to make sure.
This gets recorded and
right.
is working.
Let's see. So you said turn video off.
Yeah, let's see if that'll help with anything. But if if our voices are,
I can hear you the whole time. Like, you didn't stop in this audio. It just was so it might not even matter unless you're doing a video clip of this.
No, I'm not. It just helps with like in conversation, but like this is totally fine. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Sounds good.
Well, now I have to go back and remember what you were talking. Okay, so
yeah, I was talking about releasing from indoctrination to be in right relationship with myself at the expense of the relationships I had with blood family, with the people that were only satisfied with me when I was doing what they wanted me to do for my life.
Right. And that hits home so much because I was actually raised a Jehovah's Witness. So similar ideas around expectations and like this constant shaming of who you are and having to repress in order to be deemed valuable and deemed like worthy of love.
That's right.
Yeah. And so it's one thing that I noticed about like every time I refused to believe what was being told to me, there was always a pushback and a sadness coming from the people that helped raise me. And that was harder for me. I mean, like, it was hard for me to come to terms with how what I thought was God at the time, like, was viewing my life. But to have like my family, like my mother, struggle with me being fully who I am, that felt like, cause that's my first God is my mom. That's like my original God. Right. So learning how to take in and get, take in the information of people who think they know you because, you know, that they've raised you, they've been around you, and allowing them the space to kind of come to terms with that, whether they don't or do, was never a part of like how I define myself.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, so coming to terms with that, but then I'm like losing my thought. I'm like, come back to it, guys. Come back to it.
It's so good. Take your time. I understand.
Yeah, but learning that it is okay to be wrong. And that there might not be this whole black and white and omnipotent and perfection that we've been told is there. And then when that shattered for me, that idea that like, if you're not this way, then you can't be any way at all.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Completely just dismantle and left me wide open to explore everything. And that's why
that was the same for me.
Yeah.
It is the same for me because when I think about it, I'm like, what is this obsession we have with right, wrong binaries, whether it be religion or the value of a human life, or whether or not Black people deserve to be treated a particular way, whatever it is, there's always a yes, no, right, wrong binary that always comes up. Whether you should be queer or not, like when the questions themselves shouldn't even be asked. It's like, how can I be in right relationship with the people who manifest that there are more possibilities than those that I've been taught? It's like, you have no more proof than I do. Like, what kind of God is there? You know what you've been taught and believe, based on those principles and practices. But do we allow ourselves to make room to be in community with those who are different than us? And I feel like amongst like Black communities, especially the Black church, there is an amount of there's so much of a cultural rest and trust in that because of where we've come from and how much we've struggled. And I think that space creates like this kind of safe haven for us. And in that safe haven, we don't allow ourselves to think outside of it, because we're like, if I move outside of this, then I'm not protected. Then anything can happen to me. And I'm like, I understand, I empathize with that. And also I won't be limited to it, and I won't be limited by it moving forward in my life. I want to know what being in right relationship with spirit is. I want to know how powerful I am. I want to know that I don't have to, like, everything that I've been told, I can also question or be curious about. And that my life is not some period of time where someone is like looking at me, waiting for me to do what is pleasing to them. Like, I want to be able to know that. I think about it in the ways that, look at this whole world. If I cut my finger, it attempts to heal itself no matter how bad it is. Like, our bodies are created that way. The food we eat is mostly, processed and whatever else. Our bodies are working double time. We don't have to set an alarm clock for our lungs and our heart to beat, and our lungs to expand and take our next breath. Who created the mountains? There are vast bodies of water that take chemical imbalances. Everything that grows on Earth comes from dust storms that spread seeds throughout the world. It's like, y'all not gonna tell me that the limitations are, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, there are so many more possibilities that we can't be in touch with because we limit ourselves. And I'm like, the divine masculine and everything that is embodied in the power that we need, that we reflect on in our own lives, speaks to the evolution and potential for new possibilities, but not if we stay in the spaces that feel comfortable to us. We have to stay curious no matter what.
Absolutely. And when you were talking about like staying in communities because it feels safe, that is so rooted in trauma. That's like that's like the mentality that we have is like, I want to feel connection. I want to feel a part of something. And there's all these things outside of this community that was built for me. They said it was built for me. These people look like me. Like, there's so many things outside of that community that will literally kill me, that I need to stay within this community to survive. And that's so rooted in our historical trauma. And so to do what you are doing, to do what so many people are doing, of starting to be curious and starting to look at the ways in which that community has nuances, and we need to start celebrating those nuances.
Yes. That's right.
It's a part of that magic. It's a part of the process of healing. It's so healing. And we are nature, as you were talking about. Like seeds were meant to spread and grow. And all of that is our process. Oh my goodness. Yes. Like,
it's beautiful. Like, it's so beautiful.
Whoa.
Especially because I'm obsessed with like mycelium networks and mushrooms. And like, just thinking about the fact that nothing would be alive on Earth without them is crazy to me. It's just like, like, even that, the fact that I learned about these proteins that grow in plants that are forced to grow out of season because capitalism and food production has become a major market. especially like in the United States, but also around the world. And when a plant is planted and harvested outside of its season, as a defense mechanism, it literally grows with toxins in it that can destroy your digestive system over time. I'm like, all these things, like all the languages of everything that is alive on earth, we need to be in right relationship with. And that's some of the ways that I was able to separate myself from indoctrination, because the world proved to me that there was more to believe in and more to be in right relationship to than some male god in the sky. Like, I'm a believer in so many ways. And I practice gratitude in ways that don't force me to gender God or to place limitations on how I'm supposed to perform my life in proximity to God. It means constant right relationship with humans and every other living thing here. It means not taking more resources than you need. It means learning how to share space with one another. So those are the ways that my worship and my gratitude are expressed in any of my work. So I hope and pray that all of us get there too. It's definitely not an easy journey. It's easy to be greedy out here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There is generative energy in your practice and in the ways in which you express your masculinity, and outside of the masculinity. That's truly beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for those
words. I appreciate that, Goddess. I really do. I do. There's a sweet energy here that I'm grateful for as well.
Holding space for all that love, all that Black That's queer right. love. Yes. So because you have gone through all of this emergence and continue to do so, how does your community reflect this back to you now? How does your community kind of like hold space for all of this emergence, and how do they practice it with you?
You know, I'll be honest, it's a give and take and a push-pull, you know, oftentimes and beyond. Like, and I'll give an example. I've recently been, you know, I'm someone that, because of the way that I was raised and what I've had to do to survive indoctrination and to get out of it, and then what that has meant to kind of raise myself and to be part of communities that actually, and then start to like build trust building practices that allowed me to be in community space with other people, allow myself to be loved, to be taken care of, to get access to resources. I think one of the biggest ways that community is in relationship with me now is like that same rebellion I had as a child navigating this is the same rebellion, probably times 10, that I have now as a curious Black masculine person. And as I navigate community space, I do notice, you know, the ways that I may fall short, or that I, you know, my masculinity might sometimes show up as defensive, or learning in public is sometimes hard, or whatever those things are. And as I live my life to be present with what it means to be a human being, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to be this shiny model of a human. I'm not trying to be this perfect rendition. I want you to know that I struggle. I fuck up sometimes. You know what I'm saying? I have ways that I have yet to unlearn about my masculinities due to the dominant culture of what how masculinity has been shown to me and what that culture has been. But I know that I'm willing to be active in the work of undoing and reimagining Black masculinities. You know what I'm saying? So that's been the biggest thing. Like, there are so many people in my community that are still trapped in, like, there's a realization of who they are, but they also are still struggling with like completely being outside of indoctrination, or, you know, the Bible and all these other things. There are people who, you know, feel like they gotta be a particular way with women because we have yet to, you know, in any massive radical way, detach manhood from masculinity, and held manhood accountable as a culture versus masculinity as a whole. And because I think of masculinity as an energy that does present itself as a set of tools and resources that can be abused as power. And as I reflect on that and navigate that, I understand myself to be someone who wants to be an example of what reimagining can look like. And so I hold space. I try to be there when community needs me. And it just, having the conversations that push back against what we think we know. I'm like, I want us to constantly be okay with normalizing conflict with what we've grown comfortable in, because there's still more, you know what I'm saying? And that has been a big thing for me. So with community, I've just tried to hold spaces that invite complexity rather than even the activisms we've learned or the limitations in movement work or whatever. It's like in the fight for Black lives, we still have not gotten to a place where we allowed all Black lives to matter. We got some people that are okay with trans lives, some people that are like, these women aren't women, some people that are like, you know what I'm saying, you're not Black enough or whatever the case is. And so all of these nuanced conversations, though important, still need to be met with the complexity that we also have a means for what it could look like to be powerful in community outside of the white gaze. Oof. And so that's how I try to reflect on all of it. That's how I try to reflect on all of it, because man, is it all so complex. But I feel like we can do it. I feel like the most brilliant people in the world are people of color, Black people. And I'm like, if anybody can get this shit right, it's us. You know what I'm saying? It might not mean that we all become millionaires, because whiteness is created for white people, and we understand that very much. But what does it mean to be in right relationship with one another? As Black people, if all Black lives matter, does it just mean the Black lives you think are good? Or do we have room to also provide resources to people who haven't been so good or whatever in the construct of what that means? So I just try to keep extending community and staying elastic so that I can expand and grow as I do with community.
Yes. When you were talking about the different, like when people get defensive over like, oh, you're not Black enough. Oh, like we need to put like Black men first, whatever it may be. There's so much defensiveness there. And that defensiveness.
So much to unpack about that.
Yes. And there's a way to unpack it in which we don't have to be defensive. Like the defensiveness feels very rooted in whiteness. And it feels like a tool that like white men have used for so long to not truly face themselves. And so we use that tool as well. And it's such a disassociation of our true selves for what's actually happening. We are built, like we build these walls of defense and behaviors that express anger that push us away from what's actually happening in the moment. And that's what I know from what you were saying.
And it's either going to be reductionist or expansive. It's like, those are the only, like the direct, it's either going to go in every direction or it's going to reduce someone to a particular thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were having a conversation, and I think because, because I'm a light-skinned person and you're a rich-skinned person, I'll bring this up, but like we were having a conversation on colorism, and we were talking about light-skinned privilege. And one of the things that came up was the fact that light skin and like beauty standards are definitely not mutually exclusive, because you have to factor in some of the other benefits that aesthetic privilege affords people. So I thought about, albino people, disabled people, fat people, people who are just anyone that doesn't fit into the desirability politics whiteness has impressed upon us in media or anything else. And so, able-bodied people, all these things. And I'm like, when we consider those nuanced spaces, someone who is not light-skinned, conventionally attractive, skinny or whatever, as I am, I have to hold space differently than someone who is albino and struggling with a cognitive ability or whatever other things. And I'm like, so when we talk about light skin, we need to also have the complexity of understand that light skin is not where the privilege is. Aesthetics and light skin together are where we need to have the conversation, because on the spectrum of colorism, in order to center those who have been harmed the most by colorism, it takes us understanding that those nuances are why, it's like the desirability politics whiteness has created is why rich skinned people are not desirable. The ways that we have made skinny people uplifted is why fat people are not desirable. You know what I'm saying? So I want us to complicate the conversations around that. And a lot of times, because of the rebellion that I have against just these umbrella structures of activism that don't complicate conversations enough to speak to people who have been in these varying situations, there's like, it's hard. But as a people, I feel like to reimagine it and to imagine what Black futures can look like, we need to be able to not always see ourselves the way white people see us. I'm like, we're in community with one another. White people don't get to say who's beautiful in this space. You know what I'm saying? We could talk about media and all of them. We can talk about the tailored conversations for each of these things instead of just impressing upon people that rich skinned people are not beautiful, so they need to be uplifted. I'm like, are you saying that? Or are you just using, are you only seeing the world in proximity to how white people see the world? I'm like, all of our media needs to have rich skinned Black people. You feel me? I'm like, how do we create that for ourselves instead of waiting for white people to do it? So it's such a complicated, but those are some of the ways that when I'm in community, I do ruffle a lot of feathers, because we want to, I want us to be able to push past how white people have translated our humanity back to us in ways that are damaging. You know what I'm saying? And I want to see us be able to be in right relationship with one another beyond white gazes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that being in that place of like having a conversation with people that we may or may not know, might be close to, and standing our ground is something that I'm learning to practice, but all the ways in which I've seen it, and all the ways in which I've seen it practiced were from this very like toxic, like guard, like I was talking about that defensive toxic way. So like when I feel
power hungry,
yes. And so when I feel that tightness and that constriction that comes from being hurt and wanting to protect myself, there's a certain stance I get, like both feet on the ground, leaning in, like knuck if you buck kind of thing, like if you want, we could go. But then then I come back into myself, like after I have created like a wall, I'm able to come back into myself and say, am I actually feeling about this? And why is it hurting me? And how do I engage now from knowing that place that a boundary has been crossed within my safety, where I can engage and say, no, something about this is fucked up. And how do we reevaluate this? And how do we start to dissect it and pull at the ways in which there is so much repair that needs to be done here?
Absolutely. That's a huge part of it. Like there is so much repair to be done. And like when we think about, repairing, I think about community-based work, because ultimately, I think about the ways that white people have destroyed so much of even what we've tried to build amongst ourselves. So I think about Black Wall Street. I think about Tulsa. I think about all these different moments in history and the trauma that's like in our bones, in our backs, in our hips. Like we were talking about those energies. I kind of like, I try to center and find where some of these trauma energies are so that I can be in relationship with it rather than, taking an ibuprofen just so that I don't feel that it's there. It's like, no, I want to know how to show, you know what I'm saying? And obviously those things are hard because we deserve to feel good at any given moment. And sometimes we don't have the capacity to go through what the pain is like. But I think about the center of us as a people, and really wanting us to I wish, I'll say, my hopeful thinking is that I wish we weren't so tired and exhausted with the world, that we'd have the effort to learn what it means to be in community, to know that none of us are disposable, and that we all should be against investing Black bodies in prison industrial complexes, and that we need to be in right relationship with each other, and who has privilege in our communities, and how do we get access to these spaces to bring people who are not visible. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's talk about how to be in right relationship with privilege and those who are not seen. Like, I want us to think about it in more expansive ways than you owe me, and so you need to be at the back. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, let's complicate the ways whiteness wants us to be up against one another in rigid ways. Like, I want to soften for you. Like, how can I be in my relationship and share space that feels like a brave space, not even safe space, because we don't have access to that as a people. There is no safe space per se, but there are spaces we create that are brave enough to have conversations that we need to be having, so that we can soften into trust building with one another, so that our communities can talk about community accountability and transformative justice and restorative justice, rather than throw him in prison or I'm gonna kill him because they did a particular thing to me. What does it look like to create our own version of life, in community? So it's hard, but I just can't help but believe that it's possible.
Yeah, I am right there with you. I know it's possible. Just in the work that is now being done and the spaces in which we're currently in. Like, I could never have dreamed of this as a little thing back in the day. Like, what?
Could not have. Okay.
Pat on the back, pat on the back. When you said, I wish we weren't so tired, do you feel that rest needs to come before the work, specifically for Black people? Do you feel like rest needs to come first?
I feel like it's a community breakdown as well, that we don't have rest because we haven't been able to do the work to get together. So I feel like it's both ends. Like, in order to get rest, we have to be in community with one another, so that when you need to step down, I got your back. You know what I'm saying? Right. When you need to sleep and you got 2 babies, I need to be able to say, I'll take them for the day so you can do what you need to do for yourself. Or Black-owned businesses is coming to the neighborhood, their local neighborhoods, and being like, who needs a job? You know what I'm saying? All of these different ways that I feel like even though we are tired and our exhaustion looks different ways, it's like, I feel like I want us to wrap our minds around the sacrifices and the exhaustion that was even crazy amount, like it was insurmountable compared to what our ancestors have been through. You know what I'm saying? From those who are in zoos to those who are enslaved to any of it. And I almost hate this kind of entitlement that comes along with, movement work today, that doesn't leave room for people to fall short or to need help or to not always have the politically correct language or whatever those things are. And I'm like, but the greater picture is right relationship. You know what I'm saying? Right relationship is more important than somebody who slipped up and misused your pronouns in it, like unintentionally or whatever. Like, right relationship is more important. And it's hard because when we're hurt, those things are so much more of a gut punch. You already got all this hurt that we're managing and all this hurt that we're carrying from generations. And then the tiny things just make us, are a blow to our gut. And it's like, we don't have a way, there's no map on how to do this. So that's why we need community. In order for rest to happen, we do have to start the hard conversations. In order for rest to happen, we do have to learn what right relationship looks like. In order to be in right relationship, we do need to know what it means to live a life instead of just surviving. You know what I'm saying? And we need each other to do that.
Absolutely. And I don't think that rest is synonymous with like checking out or this place of no action.
That's right.
Like rest, especially for Black and Indigenous people, is work. Learning what rest actually means and not having shame around it is something that we are continuously reminding ourselves to do.
Mm-hmm.
And rest can look like so many different things. Like when I think of my rest now, my rest looks like learning how to practice boundaries with white people because I need rest from white people.
That's right.
Yes. And that's a practice in itself. That's toilsome work. So yes, you are in a place of rest. Feels like a place of like breath, like fully being in the breath and being present so that you can come in wholehearted, whole-bodied, like you were saying. Absolutely. And have those hard conversations. Like I imagine like a group of all my Black loved ones like laying down in like this almost cuddle puddle kind of thing, but not like creepy. And just
it's so good.
Breathing together and like allowing what we need to say to come up. And because we are in a place where we feel secure and brave, we can hold that space together. All of that feels like a whole bunch of work, and all of it feels like delicious work, restorative work.
If we can do it together. Absolutely. If we can do it together, it is that delicious work, you know, and I call that breathing into each other. It's like, I'll take your exhale and you take mine. Like we breathe into one another because that, like the sweetness in that next breath is the reminder that we're both alive. Like, let's figure this shit out. It takes all of our minds. It takes all of our experiences. It takes the nuance. I ain't talking about struggle Olympics where we like, well, I actually this or you actually that. You know what I'm saying? We could do that forever if you want to talk about experience, because Black people have been through some shit. But I want to know how we map out right relationship without also considering any of us disposable, you know? And that's going to take generations, probably. I'm not even sure if humans as a species will be here by that time, you know, but I hope that
something will be here.
Saying, if something will be here, I'm like, every time they report some alien sightings, I'm like, come pick me up, okay, like an Uber. Please come get me. I cook, I clean, listen. I'll be ready. So, but I value community so much because I know how powerful Black people are. I know it because the Black cookout, powerful. I know it because the Black family reunion, powerful. The Black church, though indoctrinating and all these things, is also powerful. It's limited because of the ways that, you know, God has been given to us or shown to us through Christianity and the umbrella of that. But the camaraderie, the fellowship, the coming together in spiritual worship together, that energy in one building come through. Like the gospel music, you couldn't pull me off gospel music if you tried. You know what I'm saying? They be saying some wild stuff sometimes. But give me an organ and Dorinda Clark Cole, okay? And we're going to have a good time. So I think of all these spaces where Black people are in community. And I'm like, what are those possibilities? And how do we sustain them so that it only strengthens, so that there's no breakdown? I'm like, Wakanda is real. That was somebody's imagination, but that can be a real understanding of how we fortify one another. You know what I'm saying? Showing up with our strengths, our privileges and resources to get access and present new ways to bring in community. That's so important to me.
Absolutely.
And I didn't mean to get you off track too, because I know you was.
No, we were. We got way off track with like almost everything, but I think everything we've spoken to has been what the conversation should have been about. We are where we need to be. So, and I love beautiful. That. I deeply appreciate that.
For sure, I'm grateful.
I do.
And any questions you want to throw in there, feel free. I don't have anything.
I'm still taking in what you were just talking about, because I'm taking back to what's the movie? Is it Beloved? No, it's not Beloved. Why am I thinking The Color Purple? I'm pretty sure it was Suggs, Grandma Suggs. Yeah. And like how she brought everyone together in the woods to laugh and cry and dance. And all of that came through us. Like all this gospel music, that all came through us. And yes, it's put into Christianity, it's put into all those things, but it came through us. So that's saying something.
That's
like
right.
Wakanda is always within us. We created it.
That's right.
So it's what we have always been given, like these tools that feel not meant for us and weren't usually not meant for us. And we're meant to stifle us. And we have made such fucking treasures.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And in that power that even gospel music, in that power that is harvested when we start, it's like a releasing of our pain. And and almost like it's a conjuring, every hallelujah, every thank you, every like gratitude or praise, every dance, it is a conjuring of spiritual energy that is sustaining and filling us into overflow. And it's like we go out into the world and are depleted. But guess what? When you come back, everybody, you could have went to the club Saturday night and if you showed up Sunday morning, you still just needed to let something out. You needed to, you know what I'm saying? You needed to let something fill you again, because it is hard to be in the world and be Black. It is hard to be in the world and be queer and non-normative and all these things. And the church is like, this is a place you can come. And I always said that if I ever, wanted to share space in a church, it wouldn't be because I wanted to join it as some member or, go through some particular practice. I might not even stay for the sermon, but that praise and worship is just something that's just in me. Okay.
You just say it for the song. Like, yeah.
And then peace sign, you feel me? Because I can't. Y'all not about to tell me every gay person come to the altar. You're not about to get me.
I will moonwalk right on the patty.
I'm good. I know how much fruit to get out this bowl. Okay.
I would love to have like a church thing, but like without all that, like that would be amazing to come and sing and oh my goodness.
Yes. And actually a friend of mine has been doing a thing called Pandemic Joy, and it's like invite only, but we come together as family and release things and sing songs and like, hear from someone and who has like a message from the universe or a spiritual message that we need for the week. But it's not pulling from the Bible. It's not pulling from some patriarchal understanding of the world. It's like today our spirits are exhausted. Every person in the room go through and release what you need, and we'll give them room to talk about their feelings and traumas and all those things. It's just like such a powerful space. And I wish we had more spaces like it.
Get your joy. It's beautiful how that joy is not just what we deem as like happiness, but is the deliciousness of being seen and being heard and being able to cry or laugh. All of that, it seems, is held within that space. And that's all joy.
Right.
Yes.
That's right. I love it.
I do want to come to one last question before we kind of get into Yazi and Black Girl Masculine.
Sure.
Of being assertive, and how you have started practicing assertiveness outside of the behaviors of toxic masculinity, because that's what I'm learning now is like, how do I find my assertiveness and not reproduce the ways in which I've seen, my dad or like other men doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like how have you been learning that? And how have you made space for yourself to kind of, like you were saying, like I fuck up. How have you made space for yourself to publicly talk about that?
Well, when I think my upbringing itself, like when you feel trapped for so long, you're not going to let nothing or nobody, limit you any longer. And that's where I found myself. My curiosities peak beyond even the space that we're introducing a lot of the world through activism. And, that's not, and even this, like, even when I talk about myself in a particular way, there are ways that socially things will be perceived. You could be seen as arrogant for saying that, or vain because you think you're beautiful, or whatever other things. So I had to stop caring at the extent that I was caring, I'll say, what people thought of me. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, am I going to continue to reduce myself to the standards I've been conditioned to believe are socially acceptable? Or am I going to continue to actively learn what being in right relationship with myself and community is or means? And I also, I'm very honest and upfront about who I am. I tell people all the time, I'm not a nice person. I'm kind, but I'm not nice. I believe kindness is regard for people's humanity, and niceness is mostly what white people do, which is the performance of kindness. But they'll go vote against you and vote for Trump tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? But they'll stand in your face and be like, "Hi, how are you?" You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I ain't with all that. I'm not nice. Okay. So please go somewhere with that. I don't want the false pretenses of how you're socially supposed to interact with anyone, because I want you to treat me how you would treat me behind closed doors when nobody's looking. And that's such a hard thing, because the world is not that honest. And when I think about being aggressive, or assertive and all those kinds of things, like I said, masculine energy for me does a particular set of tools and resources. And I don't believe assertiveness or even aggression are like bad characteristics even, I don't think that they're terrible things to have, but I think that when you take more than you need or use more than you need to in any given moment, disregarding people's humanity, abusing that space for power, all those things, that's when it becomes, that toxicity and that toxic culture. And because masculinity has been attached to men, the idea that men, and that's how we're conditioned too. It's like masculinity is attached to men, but we're not holding men accountable. We're holding masculinity accountable. And that means everybody else that is also masculine. You know what I'm saying? So when I think about it, I'm like, can we be with the space of how to be other things other than happy and sweet all the time? I'm like, everybody does not know how to be that love and light ass nigga all the time. You know what I'm saying? We feel other things. I'm just saying, we feel other things. You know what I'm saying? I'm just being real with you. We feel other things. And when we feel other things, it's like, where are the limits that show us what people are satisfied with about us? I'm like, what parts of me are you satisfied with versus the parts of me that you don't want to know or be around? I'm like, I'm not going to perform for you. If I'm not doing well, you'll know I'm not doing well, and vice versa. So when I think about things like assertiveness and things like that, I'm like, that's how you're powerful. People do want you to be small, especially lesser than them. Most of the time, that's how we, pull on each other, is like, I'm more valuable than you in some way, because we've ranked, who is valuable and who isn't based on that social conditioning of, whiteness being top tier, white people being most beautiful, all that. And I'm like, when do we get to construct the world through our gaze? What does our gaze look like? And so when I think of being powerful through masculine energy or being assertive, things like that, I think it needs to be accompanied by the complexity that we are also tender and soft and so much else. And that our power is not like, it's what you do with the power of assertiveness that matters. You know what I'm saying? Like, have I harmed you, or are you not prepared for how powerful I am? Like, those are valuable questions that I think also have been abused. So a lot of times we don't get to talk about them. You know what I'm saying? And I think men have done a lot of that damage for sure. And that accountability needs to look like the people who are in power or who have held power in a particular way, showing up in that accountability in the ways that they manifest their masculinity, their, the power that they could so easily yield. And I want us to be able to understand the difference between someone, being powerful in a particular moment, and abusive power. So, yeah.
Yes. There's so much vulnerability and accountability in assertiveness. Like
Absolutely.
you are letting people know you've kind of started impinging on a boundary I have. Let me restate that boundary so that you can no longer cross it. So you are letting people know you have been, you feeling some type of way.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And
at all.
At all. And as Black people, when we start to, work that muscle and that tool that is naturally within us, like anyone else, it's seen as a threat. It's seen as overstep, like crossing, like we're not staying in our place. And then we are deemed a danger again, simply for,
that's right.
Yeah, simply for, creating a boundary. And I love the way you talked about it's when we start to utilize those tools of assertiveness, aggression, and we were going to get into what we did, but like anger specifically, to start to impinge on other people's boundaries and start, using them to take up more space than we need to take up. That's right. That's when and that goes for everyone. That's when it becomes really toxic and not for the collective good or even for our own good. And so learning how to find the sweet spot within that is such, it's hard. It's just hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I think
it's hard.
That's why I said it takes that kind of a differentiation between abusive power and understanding of power, like centering ourselves in the ways that we're powerful. You know what I'm saying? Some of the ways that I'm powerful, another person who, has, manifests or leans more toward the divine feminine would, they'd be powerful in different ways that I'm powerful, but like that just gives us diversity. You know what I'm saying? All these different things. And I think about the difference between assertion and aggression. I was like, aggression feels like, and I want to be mindful of distinguishing that, because aggression is that forward motion of like distinguishing power. And though it doesn't always have to be toxic, because sometimes you got pushed through the door when somebody just literally won't, or you're coming up against power especially, or won't respect your boundaries or your humanity and all that. And assertion is like, I'm gonna let you know I'm not to be fucked with. Aggression is like, you fucked with me, so now here we are. You know what I'm saying? So it's that, like, distinguishing those two power manifestations is so important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you have been using the term right relationship quite a bit throughout this chat. Can you tell us what right relationship is, and then get into Yazi and Black Girl Masculine?
Yes,
so I'll keep you here.
No, it's really all. I'm so much enjoying this. Like, any questions you have, I love talking anytime from here.
I'm so down.
When I say right relationship, I mean working towards honest connection with the people that you care about, that you consider community. It means allowing ourselves to come together in our most powerful ways, and supporting ourselves in the ways that we might fall short or not always know how to be in those spaces. So when I think about right relationships, especially among Black people, I think about how we all experience a particular kind of harm from whiteness, some of us different than others. And on that spectrum, we are all like in a place where we should be working toward what it means to fortify Black community and Black strength. Whether it means supporting each other and our children, to making sure our elders is straight, for the rest of their life. You know what I'm saying? So I feel really passionately about constantly evolving with community so that we can show up in ways that feel and manifest the strength of our communities. And that shit is hard because we different as hell, and Blackness is so diverse. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard, and it doesn't feel good when we have to open up to spaces that that don't always align with being politically correct or whatever. And that's why I'm like, we got to create what our gaze looks like in the midst. Like, I got to know who I am against whiteness as a system and a construct. And I have to know who I am and how I'm powerful outside of the white gaze. I'm not trying to impress a white man ever, like literally. So in that, I think that right relationship is being able to see ourselves and also see ourselves in proximity to how we come up against and survive in this system.
Yes.
And then Yazi is actually one of the ways that, one of the things I created. Well, Black Girl Masculine came first in 2016. It's a nonprofit organization that centers masculine women, trans, and non-binary people. And specifically because, at first I saw like Black Girl Magic was popping back then. And one of the things I saw was like a very high femme kind of media presence of Black Girl Magic. And I'm like, at the time, I saw a lot of my community being like, damn, like I don't see myself in it. And I felt the same way. I was like, I don't see myself. Am I not also worthy of this kind of, rolling over Black feminism? Am I also a part of the community that you want to defend or support in this fight? And so I created this platform not to be divisive to it, but to add nuance to the conversation of it. And it's been really powerful. And we open up conversations that are specific to masculine people because I do want Black masculine non-normative people to know that our masculinities are valid and it's not in proximity to male ones, and that there is nuance in our masculinity that also doesn't exist with people who have proximity to power, like men. So when I started to roll this out, it was really important to me to create a space that allowed for the Me Too stories of Black masculine people, to talk about toxic masculinity, to talk about how because we're masculine and wear certain clothes or whatever, the majority or dominant culture is, that doesn't mean we don't also experience sexual violence or experience certain harms, coming up against and understanding the structure of masculine privilege, all these things. So as I'm continuing to navigate it, my community's been so exceptional and just been rocking with me, and it's been a sweet, sweet time. I'm just really grateful for how we've continued to shape and reimagine Black masculinities as a community and try to create what accountable masculinities can look like. And it's been beautiful. And then the pandemic, as the pandemic hit, I sat at home and, wanted to create some clothes for myself because it's hard to buy pants when your waist is a 28 and your hips are 36. And I'm like,
the Black struggle. Oh,
I'm telling you, the little belt loop thing.
Yes.
Do the little belt loop thing. You got the little sagging pocket in the back, all this stuff. So I started to randomly design some clothing, and then I posted it, and then it was crazy. Everybody was like, yo, I pay you for that right now, blah, blah, blah. So I deleted the post and I thought about it. I was like, yo, I should make this like a completely degendered clothing line. And that's how Yazi was born. I initially came up with the language of Yazi because that's what I want to name my child, my future child, who visits me often. So it's such a sweet child. And when they visit me in my dream and just throughout the day, I set up emails and I write them all the time and just like think of them often. And so I named the clothing line after them. And it's just been such a really sweet journey because I want to pay more attention to bodies rather than men's, women's sections. I'm like, I don't want to have to go to a men's section any more than a gay man probably wants to go to a women's section to buy their clothes or whatever else. I'm like, it don't have to be like that. Like, we should know by this day and age, we should know that there are nuanced bodies and that gender energies even don't discriminate on the body that they manifest in. So Yazi was born and I rolled out pre-orders on the 29th, and 10% of all sales will be going to immediately to Black families via cash payments that were impacted by COVID-19, things like that. Pre-orders end on the 12th, and then we'll start rolling out that information for people to apply and all of that. So I feel really grateful overall for how the universe has been using me, and I hope that I can continue to honor my platform and my community even as my platform grows. So I'm just eternally grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you for sharing. I want to plug in the Reimagining Black Masculine Future series that you did, because that's what put me on to you. I don't know how it came to me, but so dope. Like, I was like making everyone listening to it. So I'll put a link to that for sure in the show notes.
Thank you so much. That was a really inspiring series. And I'm actually about to upload the caption videos too. So there'll be 2 plugins. It'll be the original ones I did. And then since I didn't have access to the caption software then, which I will going forward, I'm doing a second set of videos that I'll be posting this week on the actual, like, with captions. So, so that anyone listening knows that they'll have access for our hard of hearing community.
Yeah, we've been talking about that at Sunseed too. We're like, how do we get the captioning software? So I might have to hit you up about that.
I got you, definitely. And thank you so much for that plug. That series was such a good time. I had so much fun. As you can see in the videos, I had so much fun. It was such a great time.
I'm gonna put the Cash App for Black Girl Masculine in the show notes and links to y'all's pages for sure. And then this is the second season of Sunseed Community, but this season we are doing a BIPOC celebration giveaway. So if you post on IG and or Facebook a picture of yourself with anything to do with like what we talked about today, and you tag Black Girl Masculine and SSC, your handle will be put in a drawing for a copy of Love and Rage by Lama Rod Owens, because that book is so dope. And I want to get that
listen, y'all need it, because the anger that we feel is valid, and we also need to sustain ourselves. And that book is so good for doing both, feeling the rage and also surviving the rage.
Absolutely. So yes, please post a photo or like your favorite quote just talking about this particular episode. I am so grateful that we did this, Nalo. Like, you are super dope.
And so are you. You are such a good host. Yes, I had such a great time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And best of luck on Yazi. My kiddo meets me too in the spirit realm. So I see you. I see you, Yazi. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
That's it, y'all. That's our show. Big thank you to Black Dream Escape for providing us with the intro and outro music for season 2. We sincerely love your work and hope rest comes to us all. And big thank you to Vesta for producing our small but mighty podcast. This show is powered by the people. May the abundance come back to you and spread like wildfire. Sunseed Community is a space to practice collective healing. We do this through workshops, body and energy work, tarot, individual container building, and this podcast. To learn more, book us, and support us, visit sunseedcommunity.com and follow us on IG or Facebook at Sunseed Community. Bye, y'all.
Rest will come. Rest will come. Rest will come. Rest will come.